Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach Mates. Well, draft night is just a couple of nights away. So what we're going to do in tonight's podcast is we're going to go through some of the top prospects and where they might end up, as well as whether or not we think they're a good fit for that particular club that they're going to, as well as perhaps having a look at some super coach relevancy. So as per normal, I'm joined by Thomas. How are you going, Thomas?
Yeah, not too bad. Draft night's obviously on Wednesday, so looking forward to that. Definitely a very good, talented draft. When I did a bit of research, it's very deep, or bats quite deep, and a lot of midfielders. So yeah, Supercoach will be quite interesting next year with the plethora of basically this top 10 is predominantly midfield oriented. But yeah, definitely one to look forward to. So we'll kick things off. We'll try and keep this nice and brief and without going into too much detail. Just as a bit of a caveat, so essentially how we've done it is rather than kind of create our own top 10 or our own predictions, because myself and Nathan are probably not overly too now up in the draft perspective. There's probably other people out there that you can go search up on YouTube and podcasts alike to get a lot more in-depth analysis. We've taken Zero Hangers, or leave their link on below their website. We've essentially going to more do a reaction of their top 10 predictions and then add and dissect their one and chop and change what we think might be on draft night. So these 10 names have really been pretty consistent across multiple different sources that I've looked up. But yeah, we'll look into a bit of a deep dive, or not a deep dive, but a bit of a dive into how we think they probably marry up with the teams that potentially could pick him up, and whether or not we should be looking at them in Supercoach. But first off the cap, draft pick number 1. So this is the highly coveted number 1 draft pick that either goes bang or bust for a lot of clubs. Richmond's got essentially 75% of the draft hand this Wednesday, which will be quite interesting to see how they go with their selections. But yeah, draft one, number pick 1 will go to Richmond. So Sam Laylor was off the top of the cap of the rag. His under 18 champs run probably not the best Supercoach, or I've got the AFL fantasy stats wise because I didn't actually record Supercoach statistics for the under 18 championships. But 11 disposals, this is averages by the way, 11 disposals, 4 tackles, 1.3 average goals, 68.7 AFL fantasies. His strengths listed: clean hands, physicality, scoreboard impact of 3 of them. He's a 188 centimetre mid forward. Nath, how do you think the Tigers suit, or Sam Laylor suits the Tigers? Do you reckon it's a good fit for them, or could it be one of these number 1 draft picks that you look at it 5-10 years later and it's a bit of a bust pick like your Jack Watson and they're like that? Unfortunately, those picks never really got going as a number 1 draft pick.
Yeah, well, I mean, based on what you've presented here in front of me, it looks a bit like I guess overview looks a bit like what Dustin Martin did. He's a mid forward, clean hands, strong scoreboard impact, which is everything you think of Dustin Martin. And then I just had a look, so he's 188 centimeters, and Dustin Martin's 187 centimeters. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone that's going to get drafted is ever going to have the impact that Dustin Martin has. But so I mean, I suppose for Richmond they probably just need more, warm bodies more than anything. So, I guess this is the upside of finishing last on the ladder, is that you do get first crack at the best young talent. So I think, from what I've read of the draft, I think there's probably about 3 or 4 names that people are sort of tossing up as up pick number 1. I've heard that Levi Ashcroft, who I have no doubt we'll touch on here, is another one that's been touted as a potential number 1 pick. But just for Supercoach relevancy, so if he does get that medium forward, so Harley Reid was the number 1 draft pick last year, and he started the year at $207,000. I mean, it's a massive price to pay, for a rookie, when you might be able to get others who've a bit more experienced, right off the top. But you know, if these number one picks, other than a few, have basically come in and cemented themselves. You think of Harley Reid last year, Sam Walsh, just to name a few. So I mean, there's no reason why he couldn't be a viable option. So yeah, I think. I mean, again, the forward line's probably pretty grim looking next year, at least at this stage. So, if he has that forward eligibility, he might be someone you got to keep your eye on. But yeah, as I said, he's one of the names I have heard. So, at going for pick one. So, again, I don't know much about the young kids. It's sort of not really my forte. I will put the disclaimer out there. But based on that, it looks like they're sort of getting like a Dustin Martin type, which obviously they just had Martin and he retired. So if they can replace the Martin with someone who plays, similar to him, then that's probably a win for Richmond.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like they're looking for a Dustin Martin lookalike. Obviously, they're probably not going to get that kind of caliber straight away. But yeah, mid forward for them is definitely impactful. That's probably someone they missed last year or this year in particular. Just someone to really impact the scoreboard. They've got your pure mids in Taranto and Hopper and Dion Prestia when they're fully fit. But yeah, someone like a Laylaw could definitely benefit Richmond greatly moving forward in 2025 season. But number 2 off the rank. So this is really dependent from what I believe. It's could be a North Melbourne trade. So really depends on whether the Kangas will get. So officially it is North Melbourne will get the second draft pick, but there is been conversations around Richmond potentially nicking off number 2 as well, but I would be surprised if that happens. So yeah, number 2 is what they've suggested is Finn O'Sullivan. Probably not the most impressive averaging stats just off the rack there. 11.5 disposal, 69.6 disposal efficiency, 3.5 tackles, and a 41 AFL fantasy average. He's 182 centimeter mid, versatility, overhead marking, inside outside kind of game. So being able to play that inside outside game is probably very important for both clubs, regardless if he goes to North or Richmond. He was one, I believe, that Carlton were pretty keen on as well to complement Walsh and Cripps. He just seems a person that, we look at, you're going to probably see in the next kind of 8 picks, a lot of big-bodied midfielders coming up, and Finn O'Sullivan's obviously over 6 foot mark, but probably a little bit more versatile than those bigger body midfielders. He's one that's, been up there at number 1 draft pick at one point. So I think he's one that can be, very diverse in where he plays in that midfield, and could be very important moving forward, especially, as I said, a lot of these picks in these drafts are going to be quite big-bodied midfielders, whereas Finn O'Sullivan's probably one that's a bit more versatile in his ability to play that inside-outside game. But, yeah, what are your thoughts on whether this suits probably more a North Melbourne or Richmond style of midfield?
Well, I mean, I think Carlton will be hoping that he gets through to pick 3. Although there might be someone else going at pick 3, which I don't know. I haven't actually looked at the slide, so I don't know where Levi Ashcroft is going to come into this. But I think Carlton will be hoping he gets through to their pick, because I think they will pick him up at their pick. So I guess it's probably a question of whether or not this trade happens. I think if this trade happens, I don't know if Richmond will necessarily go for him. But if North Melbourne keep pick 2, then I mean, the thing with this is that it's probably quite subjective, because I think North Melbourne want to trade away from this pick, because I think all the top sort of talents are all midfielders. And I think if there's one position where North Melbourne actually aren't too bad, it is their midfield. So I think this pick's going to be very dependent on whether or not this trade does happen with North Melbourne and Richmond. But yeah, I mean, obviously highly touted. He's basically the one player I've heard of all year, other than Levi Ashcroft, as being a top 5, top 3 pick. So I mean, the thing with this is that they can really fall anywhere. In the top 10, I would Normally, I like watching or listening to Carl Toomey's draft guide because it's normally pretty accurate.
Yeah,
Which I don't know when that released. I think it might be tomorrow or
it's
even the
just.
morning of.
I've just got it up here. He's released it today.
Oh,
He's got
okay.
Finn O'Sullivan at pick 2 as well, so that's been pretty consistent.
Oh,
But
so
yeah,
yeah. So I mean, he's gonna go up at that stage, somewhere. I think it's just a question of whether or not whether or not this trade does happen. I think Richmond. I know I said earlier but I still think Richmond need him more. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a bid here for Levi Ashcroft with this pick, just because. I feel like he probably can drop one more, maybe.
yeah,
But yeah, he's going to be priced over 200,000 as well. So again, probably going to be hard to justify picking him, especially with that form line.
yeah.
But I think the talent's undeniable. I think he will slot into either one of those sides and improve them straight away if they do go down that path. So yeah, hard to ignore there with Finn.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful as well. There'll be probably a fair few 200k or higher 180k players coming into this year's draft for Supercoach next year. And yeah, as we probably know from previous Supercoaches, you've got to be very careful with how many of these expensive rookies you do pick up, because not all of them are going to go gangbusters like a Harley Reid, and they're not going to last an entire season probably playing in the midfield. A lot of them do start off their trade at half-back or half-forward to kind of get grasp of the speed of the game and then push into the midfield. You just have to look at the likes of Reid itself not playing 4 minutes in the midfield. But yeah, Finn O'Sullivan, I would say, would be probably not as high on our radars when it comes to Supercoach. Just because there's probably others out there that, as we said, this is a very deep draft with regards to midfielders. You can probably get away with some cheaper options potentially, depending on how they're priced. But yeah, moving on to number 3. I know Cal Toomey's draft, which dropped this afternoon, so go check that out on the AFL website. He put him at number 5, but yeah, Zero Hangout had him at number 3. So Levi Ashcroft, I believe this is Carlton's pick, but this will be based off the fact that Ashcroft gets, basically Brisbane matched the bid to get it through the father-son, deal. So yeah, he is one of the most impressive youngsters in this draft. I think he's been well named. From what I've heard, he's better than Will Ashcroft, which is a pretty scary proposition based off the fact that Will got the Norm Smith medal. He's an accumulator like his brother, 25.5 disposal average, 4 marks, 1 goal, 88.3 AFL fantasy average. I could see him being almost nearly a must pick in most Supercoach sides, but if he does get a consistent position in the blind side, I think him and his brother are going to tear it up next season. Would not be surprised. He's got a very smart footy IQ, offensive running, just pushes hard for it. 179 centimetre midfielder, probably midfield only when it comes to Supercoach. What are your thoughts? Obviously, you've probably heard this name spring up a fair bit. Do you reckon it's someone, as I said, we should lock away on our Supercoach sides, or is there a lot of risk flinged with this pick based on the pure fact that you've got Will Ashcroft already in there and then Dunkley and Neil rotating through that midfield? So I would only assume if he gets a round 1 berth that he rotates with those 3. And do you reckon there's enough Supercoach points to go around that it makes it a worthwhile pick at a pretty inflated price?
Yeah, well, I mean, the only thing I've heard about Levi Ashcroft is he's basically like Nick Dacos, in his draft year. So that's pretty big raps. And I think Nick Dacos has probably proved he was the best player in that draft pool. Even going into that draft pool, I think people had him as number 1, but obviously because of father-son, he got obviously fell to pick 4. I can see the same happening here with Levi Ashcroft. I think he probably is the best player in this draft. But because he's already tied away to a club, he probably won't get picked up at number 1. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually started off a halfback.
Yeah.
A halfback line. Just because that's, as I said, all I've heard is Nick Dacos-esque. With his foot skills, with his IQ, and it's sort of is going to be a bit like Collingwood with Josh and Nick Dacos, where Nick's the one that sort of stands out more, and Josh is the quiet achiever. And I know Will's already achieved a lot, but from what I've basically heard, I think Levi is like the Nick Dacos, and Will's like the Josh Dacos, just a quiet achiever, goes about his business. So, I mean, this is a dream come true for Brisbane to be, to win the premiership and then probably get the best player in the draft. It's hard to not say that this is going to be a win. So last year, last year, Jed Walter was picked 3 and he started the year at 198,000. So, I mean, I think he's going to play in their round 1 side. They'd be crazy not to play him based on what I've heard. So, at this stage, I think he's probably one of the ones I'd be more comfortable perhaps picking. Just because of the talent and the what we've heard of him so far. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually started like a Nick Dacos or Harry Sheezer, where instead of starting in the midfield, they actually start him off the half back line, and go from there.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. They've done it to Zorko with regards to putting midfielders down back and then being able to rack up possessions. Wouldn't be surprised if they do that the same with Ashcroft. They did to Harry Sheezel and North. Colby McKercher was the same thing. So whether or not he gets thrown in the deep end, Dacos as well, and it shows very quickly that as a halfback or being put in a halfback position, you probably get a bit more of a chance to read the play a little bit more easy. There's less pressure with the ball in hand, and you got a bit more time for decision making as well. So it's definitely one that's interesting to see where he'll play next year. Is a big indicator of how he'll go in SuperCoach wise. But pick 4, this was, I know Cal Toomey had Adelaide based off the fact that Carlton was going to get pick 3 and Levi Ashcroft was dropping into pick 5. But we've got here pick 4 going to Carlton, Sid Draper. So another one of those midfielders who had a quite consistent stat line average, 21 disposals, 3.8 clearances, 3.3 inside 50s for a 59 AFL fantasy. That probably tells me his disposal efficiency is not quite up there with that amount of disposal. Speed, agility, work rate, very consistent midfielder, 182 centimetres. Again, you look at the next generation of midfielders, they're looking at that 6 foot plus average, which just shows where the game's going at the moment with the size and bulk that's probably needed in the AFL system at the moment. Look, he's a ready-made player to go. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays from round 1, whether that be or if he goes to Carlton, maybe not so much with the fact of competing with Cripps and Walsh and co. But if he does go to Adelaide, I could see him definitely racking up a round 1 position there with the lack of probably genuine X factor and midfield strength they have at the moment. The Crows are probably a little bit one-sided, and that was a criticism I had of them this season. They were just a little bit sluggish, and I think someone like Sid Draper could come in and really improve that midfield strength to strength. How do you see Sid Draper moving into next season from a SuperCoach perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if he goes to Carlton, I don't think he'll get a game. I think Finn Sullivan would be more likely to play if he went to Carlton. But I think I would say the same thing if he went to Adelaide. I can see him, getting a berth in that Adelaide lineup. Just probably given the fact that he's probably the type of midfielder they need, that's quick, got a bit of X factor. So I don't know much more about him other than that. With 21 disposals and 59 fantasy points, there's probably something technically a bit off there that perhaps might need some work but I think he's someone who can, get better, as we go through the preseason stuff. So, again, just for context, so Zane Dersma was picked 4 last year, and he started the year at 193,000. So I don't think at this stage I would be going near him, just because I don't know enough about him. But again, like a lot of these, rookie price players, if they sort of have a really good preseason, and there's a spot there for them, then that might change. But at this stage, it's probably going to be a no from Sid on me, unless, of course, he's with Buzz Lightyear, and he's got a rocket strapped to his back and blowing things up into space. If anyone gets that reference, shout out to you.
But yeah, moving on to pick 5. So again, this pick could potentially slide to Adelaide. Harvey Langford, he's one of these midfielders that we've been speaking about. This has been talked about with regards to us as St Kilda supporters. St Kilda been interested in him as well. I believe 191 centimetres as a midfielder is basically that Cripps category. But you look at his stat line, it's a very hard-working kind of stat line. 25.5 disposals, 3 tackles, 6 clearances, 99.3 AFL fantasy. So a much better fantasy reading there. And just, the stats look very positive for a size like him. He's kind of that size that you could throw in the deep end straight away and based off his size alone could battle it out with the big boys. As we see here, contested work, size, scoreboard impact, or his strengths, 191 centimetres, as we said, can play both mid-forward. I guess the benefit here is you just have to look at the likes of Machado, Owens, and Philippou from St Kilda to make a little bit of a reference to that are at a similar height, and that just allows them to play both as a high half forward and be able to play in the midfield. I think a size like him is going to be very positive for the Crows. Again, whether or not you take Sid Draper or Harvey Langford, if I was probably a recruiter, I believe Sid Draper's from Adelaide, so there's that benefit anyway, and Langford's from Victoria. But I know that Cal Toomey's linked him to Melbourne at pick 5. I could see this going, I think it's actually pick 6 because, what's his face? Levi Ashcroft's with pick 5. But Harvey Langford, highly, highly rated in this draft. I think if he slips down to even pick 7, 8, St Kilda could nab him up, no problem. But what are your thoughts on someone like Harvey Langford? Is he someone that you'd feel safe picking in SuperCoach with that kind of stat line and the size he's got on himself? Or are there risks that teams, say like a Melbourne, pick him up and play him more forward, considering Melbourne's got forward issues, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just reading on here now. So if Sid Draper is a South Australian, well, I think he'll go to Adelaide regardless. Just because I know that Adelaide clubs do tend to like to pick their own first, just so there's not that go home factor.
Yeah.
So I can probably see pick 4. Who did we have a pick 4? Who was pick 4? Oh, it was pick Carlton, wasn't it?
Sid Draper, yeah.
Yeah, so I can probably see these two swapping around in reality on the actual draft night. So that is Langford goes to Carlton or whoever, and then Sid Draper goes to Adelaide. Because, I feel like Adelaide probably have enough of these types of players. If he's contested work, they've probably got Laird and Kraut for that size. They probably don't have someone like him in scoreboard impact. Well, they've got Rankin in the midfield for that. So they probably don't really need someone like that, if I'm being honest, Adelaide. I think they'd probably be better off getting Sid Draper, who's a bit quicker, a bit more agile. Just having a look back here as I've done for all the other ones. So Nick Watson was pick 5 last year. He started the year at $189,300. Again, probably be a bit of a risk, but the stat line is there. If he can get onto, a really good preseason, wherever he goes, unless it's Carlton. Then he might be a chance. But again, the disclaimer on these is that if whoever Carlton pick up, unless it's Finn O'Sullivan, I don't think they're going to probably be any chance for round 1, at least based on where Carlton are and the fact that they've got a really easy start. I think Melbourne could pick him up. I think St Kilda are sort of around the mark with that pick as well. I mean, even Richmond have picked 7 if that stays that way. Might be a chance for him. So, this is the part of the draft, I suppose, where it probably gets a little bit, more open with who goes where.
Mm-hmm.
I think any club to pick him up will probably benefit from him based on that. If he goes to Carlton, I probably wouldn't be expecting him to play. But the other clubs, he probably a good chance.
Yeah, I've just got some stats from him here. It says here, posted 9 games over 25 touches in the Coates Talent League. Obviously, it's a different league comparison to the AFL, stepped down. But yeah, it just shows he's got consistency in his game with regards to racking up the touches, which is very impressive. I guess the size is a big factor here as a youngster. Sometimes you look at, I mean, obviously Dacos is an exception, but sometimes you throw the younger kids in there, which are a smaller size, and they struggle to make an impact just simply getting out-muscled by the bigger bodies. But yeah, at 191 centimetres, you're probably not going to have a problem getting the ball at the centre. So he's definitely one to watch. It, yeah, come SuperCoach, it'll be really dependent on which team picks him up and where they're going to play him, because if he plays more as a forward from centre, or even as a key forward potentially for some clubs, you know, your centre half or half forward, then we've got a bit of problems there with probably potential of scoring. But moving on to pick 6, this one's a highly touted name, Jagger Smith. I don't know if you've heard much of him, but I believe he is a year older than everyone else. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure he was held in the system an extra year, or played in the system an extra year longer based off age. In his graduating year, as most draftees do from high school, and I think he was a year younger than everyone else. 29.3 disposals, 82.1% efficiency, 6.8 clearances, and 94.3 AFL fantasy. From what I've heard of this kid, he can run, he can play, and he can rack up the pill like no tomorrow. Melbourne are linked to him. Richmond are heavily linked to him as well, based off the fact I think he played for their VFL side. He's an accumulator, evasiveness, leadership qualities, 182 centimetres, plays a lot like Zach Butters is the one that springs to mind straight away. What are your thoughts on Jagger Smith? Do you reckon he's one of the stronger locks to be a SuperCoach option? I know that Cal Toomey's paired him up at pick 3 with Carlton. To be fair, I'd be surprised if he goes to Blues. But what are your thoughts on Jagger Smith?
Yeah, I mean, the stat line looks good here. You know, 29 disposals, you know, 94 fantasy points. So obviously can use the ball quite well. I mean, no, I don't know much about any of these guys other than basically the ones I've mentioned, which we've already done most of them. So most of these names are actually quite foreign to me now, which will require a little bit more reading, which I just haven't had the time to do, unfortunately. But yeah, based on what you said, I mean, if he's modeling his game on Zach Butters, yeah, you know, that's a pretty good role model to base yourself on. So yeah, I mean, if he can play anything like, he does actually look a bit like Zach Butters as well, just looking at his face there. The complexion's sort of the same a bit there. But yeah, just if he can play anything like Zach Butters, yeah, you know, he'd probably be a good pick. I don't know about next year. Again, a lot of these guys are just sit and wait, just given their price. So last year, I think everyone's favourite rookie, Riley Sanders, went at pick 6. He started the year at $184,800. So, again, based on that, it'd probably be hard to justify picking him at this stage. So I'll just repeat what I've said, where basically just watch over the preseason wherever he goes. Again, if it's Carlton, I don't think he'll play. If it's any one of the other clubs like Melbourne or Adelaide or someone like that, he's probably a good chance for round 1. So yeah, there's probably more watch on where he goes as well. But yeah, based on that stat line, he looks quite good.
Yeah, no, I think I reckon he's one of those players that probably could be a startup in any lineup. Looking at the Blues, you look at Walsh, Cripps. It's pretty much that third midfield spot's up for grabs. I would probably like to think that just having a wild stab at the dark. You know, you want someone who's a bit more of an accumulator as well. You got Walsh as well, who's a runner all day, consistent as anything, but just someone else that can help Walsh out. Look, I think, yeah, Jagger Smith, if he plays for Richmond, he's pretty much guaranteed to start up. Even Melbourne could use someone like him. They've got Petrarca, who's now playing more as a, you know, traditional forward, as a high half forward. Clayton Oliver needs to find some sort of preseason form to even warrant a selection with how he went last season. So Jagger Smith, if he goes to Melbourne, could be one that could be a start-up in that side. And I think with the fact he's an accumulator, it would fill me with more confidence picking him next season. But having said that, the small silver lining with these kind of smaller midfielders. Sometimes with that kind of skinnier build and not so much bulk, they can kind of get blanketed out of games. You just have to look at the likes of Neil, Sarong, Zach Butters, the top of the top. If they get tagged at any point, I'm not saying someone like Jagger Smith gets tagged in his first season, but those smaller midfielders, if they get attention on them, they kind of go quiet very quickly. And Jagger Smith just feels like a player who probably needs a lot of touches to score well come Supercoach wise, especially in his first season. But having said that, I could see him being quite a safe pick come Supercoach just because he's one that accumulates and is probably going to have quite a high ceiling come next year. But yeah, definitely one to very heavily keep an eye on. Now, these are probably some foreign names for you, Nathan. I don't even know this guy existed in the top 10 until recently. Alexander Toru, or Tauru, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. So Alex Toru, linked to Richmond. He's based off Cal Toomey's draft guide. He's linked to us as well at pick 10. I'm pretty sure he was a late bolter into this top 10. And it doesn't surprise me that we're linked to him because he's a 193 centimeter key defender, one of the key position players in this year's draft. 6.7 disposals, 2.7 marks, 1.3 rebound 50s. Obviously, that AFL fantasy score is not going to reflect his potential just because he's a key defender. So that's 28.7 AFL fantasy. Aerial ability, versatility of reading the play. What are your thoughts here? I'm just going to give you an ultimatum, Nathan. Do you reckon he's better suited to the Tigers or better suited to St Kilda?
I mean, Richmond need anyone they can get their hands on. So I would probably say Richmond, but then again, St Kilda have lost Josh Battle.
Yep.
So there is a role there to fill. But yeah, I think if you're going to base it off two, I think Richmond just need whoever they can. So I will say Richmond on that. So just for context, I just got to get it up real quick because I quit out of the page. Pick 7 last year was Caleb Windsor. And he started the year at,
I think it was like 180 or something, wasn't it?
$180,300. So if he goes at pick 7, that's probably going to be around his price. Again, I think for that price and a key defender doesn't bode well historically.
Yeah.
For scoring, especially in your first year, you sort of do get pushed around a bit by the more experienced and stronger body key forwards. So he's probably a pass for me, regardless of where he goes. But yeah, obviously you sort of do like seeing these types of players come through, especially higher up, because it does get a bit boring just having midfielders all the time. So he's a bit of a difference there, I suppose, which is always good.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think he's one of those picks that, based off his 193 centimeter, we've listed versatility there. Look, he's one that could be anything based off the fact he can play forward, play back, he can swing. I believe it says here on the AFL website, late in the season with Gippsland, he also swung forward, regularly kick goals and take marks, and shapes one of the key could be anything types in this year's group. So obviously it's stated Carl Toomey's picked him at pick 10, simply of the fact, I think, that because of Josh Battle departing, he presents value as an option. I believe that we would prioritise one of these gun midfielders first and then look to pick up a key position player if that may be the case, or another midfielder. I don't think Alex Tauru is going to be an option or a strong option for us come the top 10. I just think that potentially Richmond will pick him up. Gibcus coming off a long-term, I think it was an ACL injury, correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan.
Yes, it was ACL for
Gibcus. Had a few issues down back. As Nathan said, they need whoever they can get. I can see him doing quite well at Richmond as well, just as another third defender potentially, but I don't think he's probably Supercoach applicable, regardless if he goes to the Tigs or St Kilda. Tigers probably just get bombarded next year with the amount of pressure they probably get down back, and St Kilda, traditionally their defenders haven't overly scored too well. They probably rely on those halfbackers to get up Supercoach-wise. So yeah, I'd give it a pass regardless of where he goes in next year for Supercoach. But moving on to the final 3 picks. This one is very interesting. Josh Smiley, someone I've kept a little bit of close tabs with because he's been heavily linked to St Kilda at times. Another one of these versatile players, and the fact he's a 195 centimeter player, which is ridiculous reading off the stat line as a midfielder. So you probably wouldn't have heard that before 10 years ago. But 195 centimeters as a mid, 18.8 disposals, 5.8 clearances, 3.5 tackles for 72 AFL fantasy points. Seems to me he's one that gets bang for his buck when it comes to possessions. Agility, size, versatility. I mean, these are pretty obvious strengths based off the size alone. But how do you think? I believe I'm just going to chuck up Cal Toomey's draft as well. It's not listed. Oh, he's listed for the Tigers at pick 7. So, yeah, interchangeable pick 7 and 8. But what are your thoughts on someone like Josh Smiley? Looking at it from a SuperCoach perspective, again, if we look at a guy that's 195 centimeters, do you reckon he plays pure mid, or do you reckon there's a high chance that whoever takes him is going to utilize that height elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is the part that I don't really know of the draft, so I will put the disclaimer out there. A little bit under compared to the other guys here. I think most of them have sort of been around the low to high 20s, low to mid 20s, sometimes even pushing the high 20s. I mean, St Kilda could probably use someone like him at pick 7, but then again, I think Richmond. At pick 8. Then again, I think Richmond could use someone like him. I mean, Richmond could use basically all 10 of these guys at the minute. So, I mean, 195 centimeters. He'd probably be a good hand for Jack Steele in there. Although he probably will tire just given that that way he played. So again, just what I've done all the other ones. So pick 8 last year was Daniel Curtin, who went to Adelaide. He started the year at 175,800. So if he goes to pick 8, he's probably going to be about the same thing. Again, I probably will not be going near him. But you never know. You never know. Again, good preseason, and then we'll see how we go.
Yeah, no, as a St Kilda supporter, I would not mind him at all. I think he's one of my favourite picks come draft night. He's one that you're right in saying he can definitely help steal in the midfield as another bulk midfielder if they do persist with the likes of Owens up forward. But having said that, he just gives a bit more flexibility to our forward line. We've lost Tim Embry up there, and at 195 centimetres, he's pretty much our second tallest key forward if he goes down forward. Which I guess if we do that, swing that way, the likes of Mitch Owens can swap with him in the midfield as well. And I think that provides a bit of bulk up forward as well. And, if we do decide to throw Cooper Sharman down back as a bit of a swingman to kind of cover battle a little bit, there's an options there. I think Smiley presents St Kilda with an immense sense of versatility, as would if he goes to Richmond as well. But I would feel like my gut feeling says that St Kilda will push to pick him just because he does present that versatility. I think having said that, if we pick him at 7 or 8, I don't think we're going to pick another tall midfielder if that's the case, because I've heard fans say that, we look at McRae, you take out McRae and in the next 3 years and all of a sudden if we have 2 big midfielders in there, the kind of diversity in that midfield mix is really limited. So I would suggest we'd look at either another gun, smaller midfield. If we get Jagger Smith for whatever reason, I don't think we will, but if he slips that far, it'd be pretty an insane pick if we got Jagger Smith and Josh Smiley. So, it'd be interesting to see what St Kilda do. But Smiley presents immense versatility for any team. And I think SuperCoach-wise, I'm probably leaning towards Nathan agreeing to Nathan as well, that I have a feeling that clubs might utilise his strength elsewhere and might avoid playing a full-time mid-role. Having said that, if he ends up at Richmond, you may as well dump him in your SuperCoach side because Richmond are desperate for players. So, I would say Richmond's really the only club that I would be confident selecting for a SuperCoach perspective. But again, with a lot of these picks, you got to wait until preseason and see what presents itself come before round 1. But Leo Lombard, here's one name you might have heard of before, Nathan. He's got an insane highlights package I've seen on YouTube. I believe he's a GWS Academy pick. So they'll match whatever, I'm assuming they'll match any bid that comes their way for from other clubs because pick 9 is Melbourne's pick. But as I said, believe that Leo Lombard will go to GWS. It's linked up with Cal Toomey's pick as well. Look, he's basically guaranteed there. Feels a little bit like Jed Walter with the fact that he's got a lot of strength in him. 26.3 disposals, 4.5 tackles, 6 inside 50s, 93.3 AFL fantasy points. If the stats speak for themselves, he's one of those players that will just rack it up. And he's very explosive and his strength is immense. He could be around one starting, I think, in any side. And Leo Lombard could be very dangerous for the Suns. And it'd be one that I think it'd be very exciting to watch as a fan. Having said that, we just have to look at Gold Coast's midfield mix in the fact they've got already Noah Anderson, Tuke Miller. He's probably on the back end of his career, and Matty Rowell as well. I'm pretty sure Leo Lombard goes to Suns, but will you be picking him, Nathan? Because I guess with these explosive midfield types that do very well in underage competitions, as soon as they go into the AFL, they get chucked on a half forward flank, and that's pretty much them bust up.
I think Leo Lombard is a academy pick, isn't he?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you said that. So yeah. He's tied to the Suns. Look, I probably won't be picking him. Because I think if there's one position where the Gold Coast Suns probably do have some players already, it is probably that explosive type midfielder that Leo Lombard is. So I probably won't be picking him at this stage. But then again, the Suns have always had good run with those academy picks. So obviously there was uproar last year about the 4 of them. So I suppose this is going to continue that trend with the uproar about with what kind of access the Suns are getting through their draft picks, or their academy picks. But then again, if the Southern clubs are allowed to have father son picks, well, I don't really see any issue there. So just for context, Ethan Reed went to pick 9 last year, another Suns Academy player, and he was priced at $171,300. So based on that, I would say it's probably not likely for me. But yeah, it is what it is. Again, time will tell with him. But yeah, probably not at this stage.
Yeah, it seems like the Suns have a bit of a history in the fact that every rookie comes their way, bar probably Rowell and Anderson, and they were touted highly at 1 and 2 and whatever. But yeah, those more recent Gold Coast Suns picks, especially those who can play forward, just seem to be stuck there for a predominant part of the year and never really get through the midfield. Leo Lombard could be an exception to that, just based off his explosiveness and strength. I think if you look at that Suns midfield as it is, probably Noah Anderson is the only one that looks like he's that explosiveness, hard working. If they throw Leo Lombard through that mix, that could add an X factor altogether. But Jed Walter was one that was quite exciting, an exciting package, albeit more as a forward, and didn't really get going. I think he got injured throughout the season. But yeah, one to watch, but I think probably not quite with the fact that the Suns already have quite a plethora of options moving through the midfield and forward regardless, which Leo Lombard has to compete with. But moving on to the last pick of the day, just bring it up here. As a St Kilda supporter, I've seen this name a little bit pop up. Toby Travaglia. Cal Toomey's got this pick at pick 8. He's one that is very versatile in the fact that he can play wing, defence, probably plays a bit of mid as well. 187 centimetres, so quite a lanky player. Feels a little bit like Nazai Wanganeen-Miller, kind of esque the way that he presents himself. 21.8 disposals, 85.1% disposal efficiency, and that disposal efficiency alone kind of feels like St Kilda's going to pick him. 3.3 rebound 50s and 81.3 AFL fantasy points. Yeah, gets bang for his buck with his disposals. Intercept marking, speed, endurance off that half-bank flank. I think he's, based off what Cal Toomey said in this afternoon's draft Phantom Guide, one of the most bankable players in the pool. Everyone likes his capabilities, which center around being able to run, and then run some ball. Based off that description alone, I think he goes to St Kilda. Just based off the fact that if we can get one of the highly touted midfielders in this year's draft, and then get someone like a Toby Trafaglia who can play a bit of a halfback role, probably unleashes the likes of Sinclair and Wangani Miller are more up the ground in the midfield, which is where I see that versatility being in play for St Kilda. I think this year's draft, particularly for St Kilda, if they can get two gun players, but then being able to play them in multiple positions, that's probably beneficial. Obviously, you probably haven't heard too much of Trafaglia, but what are your thoughts on him potentially going to St Kilda, and does it benefit their needs?
Well, I mean, any time that Jack Sinclair goes in the midfield, I think it's a win for St Kilda, even as annoying as it is for SuperCoach people.
Yeah,
you know, because he seems to score so much better off that halfback flank. Yeah, I mean, the stat line's there to back it up. So obviously, yeah, if St Kilda do get him, they're probably, you know, getting someone who they'll hopefully is there, you know, for 10, 12 years. And hopefully he's not a flop like a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of other St Kilda top draft picks who've gone to St Kilda and flopped, basically, or haven't perhaps lived up to the height, as I'm sure Thomas can, you know, say is unfortunately probably why St Kilda are where they are at the minute. So again, just for context, so Nate Cady was picked 10 last year. He was 166,000. So depending on his role, he might have a SuperCoach friendly role across halfback. So again, we are dealing with Ross Lyon here. We know Ross Lyon doesn't like SuperCoach. So that's the one disclaimer. But I mean, if you can put Jack Sinclair in the midfield and he goes off halfback and sort of can do the same sort of game, he'd probably be one of the ones I'd be more likely to pick based on that, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I do agree. He's one that I do like if he ends up being defence eligible as well, based on the fact that if he does get a game, he probably plays a bit of a more SuperCoach friendly role. I can see a lot of these midfielders, whilst they're very, very impressive resumes, are going to be thrown straight in the deep end if they do play a midfield position, and a lot of them, if they don't play halfback, they're not playing high half forward, which really stunts a lot of SuperCoach's growth. Even you look at this season's draftees, it was really only like Colby McKerch's. Who else was there? Harley Reid was probably the only exception to it, playing more of a pure midfielder role, and that was based on the fact that the Eagles had nothing out there, and Harley Reid was that talented in a draft that was basically him, and that's it. But yeah, he's one that Trafaglia, if he does get to St Kilda, I believe he I don't know if he get into a round one side, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does. I could see him being ahead of perhaps like a Stocker playing off a halfback. And as I said, allows other halfbackers at the moment in like Nazai Wangani Miller and Jack Sinclair in particular to push into the midfield more often. So as I said, if we get Smiley and Trafaglia, then all of a sudden that versatility in that side increases tenfold with the likes of more of those defenders and defenders and forwards in our side being able to play more of a midfield role as well. Because as we all know, as a St Kilda supporter, our midfield was the weakest by far in our side. So if you could fix that up with those two draftees in particular, that wouldn't be too bad. But before we wrap it up, Nathan, so as we said here, this is more of a reaction than a kind of our own, top 10 draft picks. As I said, we've got these from Zero Hanger, so we'll leave the link of their website below. It's got lots of great information. I'll also leave the link of Rookie Central, where I got some of the strengths from as well. They have a really, really in-depth analysis of the draftees. It's basically a one-stop shop if you want any information from that draft pool. As I said, we're both probably not the best nous in this area, but we've just decided to give our kind of 2 cents worth and see how links is SuperCoach. But before we wrap it up today, Nathan, as we said, top 10 based off Zero Hanger's predictions in their mock draft. So Sam Laidlaw, Finn O'Sullivan, Levi Ashcroft, Sid Draper, Harvey Langford, Jagger Smith, Alex Tyru, Josh Smiley, Leo Lombard, and Toby Trafaglia. Is there anyone, as an AFL supporter yourself and someone who's quite into his stats and things like that, would there be any one of those names that you would change up or down the order come Wednesday night? Obviously, clubs can trade as they go in the night and obviously pick who they want, but who's your kind of predictions? Any of those 10 moving up or down in that within that 10 itself?
Well, I mean, I still think Levi Ashcroft is the clear best player in this draft. I know that he's gone at pick 2 or pick 3, whatever's on there, but I still think he's the number 1 player. So it's but otherwise, most of the other guys I've never even heard of. So the guys I have heard of are probably in the right spot, and everyone else I don't have enough, knowledge to be able to say whether or not they are, or where they are, or whatnot.
Yeah.
So at this stage is probably a good good draft there, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it bats very deep, and I think we're probably going to see a lot of fluidity in this draft. In comparison to other years where it's been a bit more rigid, I think a lot of clubs have been desperate to try and get their name in the first round. You look at, I think it's North Melbourne and West Coast in particular, that don't have many picks in the first round to start with, so they'll probably be wanting to trade up. Richmond have probably a bit of a trickier, not a trickier scenario, but a scenario that they've got a bit more luxury in the fact they've got so many in the first round that could they potentially trade this year's first round picks for future first round picks in future years and split their kind of draft hand evenly so they don't bomb it out all in this year's draft. It's yet to be seen. I think it's a great night regardless for some of these young kids to realise their dreams, and hopefully they hit pre-season running and make a name for themselves come round 1, because as we said, from a SuperCoach perspective, there's lots of these draftees that get named and they all price pretty highly, and realistically there's only a few that get to actually live their potential and score quite well, SuperCoach wise, not AFL wise, of course. But other than that, this will be probably our last video for this year, unless the draft, unless the SuperCoach selector gets announced late in December, which I'm not sure it does. I think it's more January, Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong. But we'll definitely keep you updated on our socials with any news that we hear off from pre-season and off-season, and we'll probably be back first thing when the team selector gets announced. But other than that, have a bit of a good rest from SuperCoach. If you're playing BBL, Big Bash Fantasy League, I know SuperCoach does a cricket Big Bash as well, so if you play that, enjoy that coming up mid-December. But other than that, that's all from us for the time being for the 2024 season. We'll catch you for the opening of the 2025 team pickup.